Hi, it's Barry Neale here. In this short video, I want to cover how you can work with someone who's blushing. Now, this primarily affects young women, but it also affects young men as well. And it can be a really embarrassing problem for them. And of course, the more they do it, the more they get embarrassed, the more they blush. So we need to break that cycle. Now, it's a really simple thing for us to work with if you know some basic techniques. And here's how we're going to work. Because really, blushing is just an example of a stimulus response event. There is some situation, some circumstance, some context in which they get in and when they blush. Or there's some thought they have and then they blush. And so what we need to do is to change the response. We can't do much about the external stimulus, but we can definitely change the response. So the primary way of working with this is to use some version of the collapse anchors. Now, if you've watched any of my other videos, if you've seen the collapse anchors, this is a really, really powerful technique. And if you don't know how to do it, go and have a look at the other video, because it is really, really one of the most useful things you can learn. Because if you understand that virtually every problem that comes in is going to be some version of when X, client does Y, then you don't need to be thinking, oh, what script do I need? Or what suggestions do I need? You just need to be thinking, okay, what's the specific stimuli? When and where does this happen? So you ask them, okay, so when and where does this happen? So that's the first thing. Then we want to find out how they would like to feel instead. So this type of problem is when X, client does Y. So our first thing is to find out when and where this happens. If you don't do this, if you just think, okay, this client is blushing, let's pull out a magic script or a magic technique, hit them with that, then it's not going to work because you've not attached it to anything. So first of all, you need to find out when and where it happens. So if they say, you ask them, okay, so the problem is blushing, when do you blush? And they say, I blush all the time. That's not good enough. You want to find out the specific context. Okay, so if you blush all the time, it won't be difficult for you to pick one time recently when you've done that. So tell me about one specific time recently where you've blushed and you felt embarrassed. Oh, it was last week when I was at work and someone said something to me and suddenly I just felt so embarrassed. My face flushed. I felt like this hot flush all over my body. Great. Okay, take me through that. So it's last Thursday. What's happening? Okay, I'm at work and this person says something to me. What you want to do is to make sure they're associated. Get them associated into that context and then you anchor it. Now you can anchor that verbally, but ideally you want to anchor that kinesthetically. So you get the anchor, okay? Then you go, okay, so that's how you've been. How do you want to be different? And this is where we want to go looking for resources. So we can go specifically and say, how do you want to be different? And get them to describe how they want to be. So it might be they want to feel confident, they want to feel calm, they want to feel relaxed. Or we can just anchor a really resourceful state. So a time in their life when they felt wonderful, a time when they felt in control of their own life, their own behaviors. It might have been a time as a child, it might have been a birthday, a celebration, a holiday, some special event. Get them fully associated into that resource. Really, really pump that up. Make the images bigger, make them brighter, really intensify them so that they really get into that positive state. Then you anchor that on a separate location. Now, in simple terms, what we can do is to just have them, so we've now got an anchor for the positive resource, we've got an anchor for the blushing. We then say, okay, now I want you to imagine that situation where in the past you used to blush, and at first you begin to feel this way, fire the negative anchor, and then you start to feel this way, fire the positive anchor, and then you hold both down. And what you should notice is an integration of those two states. These two states will integrate neurologically, and it will then become impossible for them to feel the same way because you've collapsed the state. Now, if you do that and it hasn't collapsed the state, that doesn't mean it hasn't worked. It just means you need to get more resources. So you find another time when they felt confident, or another time when they felt totally loved, or another special event, and anchor that and then repeat the above. So that's all you need to do. Now, in most cases, that will be enough. But some cases, you might have to do some clean-up work. So what does that mean? It means go back and have a look at some of the other embarrassing events that they've been through. And again, we use the same thing. So you could ask them for 3 separate events. What's the earliest time you can remember having this problem? What's the worst time you can remember having this problem? And what's the most recent time you can remember having this problem? So we get those 3, write those down, okay? So it could be at age 10, age 20, age 23 and a bit from a few months ago. So we've got those 3 things. Then we'll ask them, okay, so what resources, which if you'd have had then, would enable you to go through that situation without having to be embarrassed, without having to blush at all. What resources do you have now? If you had back then, you could have gone through that whole situation and it wouldn't have bothered you at all. And then we build up those resources, we anchor those resources, touch them on the back of the hand, anchor those resources, and then we take them back to the first event, have them go through it totally differently, feeling this way. That collapses the anchor on the first state. Then we get them to the worst example. Pump up the real positive ones, take them back to the worst example, have them relive that mentally, but now having these resources, and notice how they go through it differently. Notice how it feels different. Then we go through the most recent example, and then what we do, if we've hypnotized them, then we say, I want you to notice now that the more you try to blush, the more calm and relaxed you become. In fact, the harder you try, the more calm and relaxed you become. Go on, really try hard in vain to blush, and notice the harder you try, the more calm and relaxed you become. Then have them open their eyes and give them a mirror. Have them stare in the mirror and have them try hard in vain to blush. And notice that the harder they try, the more calm and relaxed they become. And condition this in. Really get them to try and blush. Really, really push them. Test your work. Don't just think, oh, I finished the script, that means they're cured. No, test them. Really test them. So just do that. So if you're doing this in hypnosis, that's fine. You don't have to do it in hypnosis, but just give them a mirror and have them try hard in vain to blush. And notice that the harder they try, the more calm and relaxed they become. So we're using the more pattern. The more they try to do something, the more relaxed they become. And that's really the extent of the suggestions and language patterns you really need. As long as you've got that initial trigger, then you've got the resources, you collapse it, and you just condition that in over and over and over again. And so really have fun with this. It's a really easy thing to work with. It's really can change someone's life. So that's how you can work with blushing really simply, just using the collapse anchors or a variation of the collapse anchors where we go back and we get the earliest example they can remember, the worst example, and the most recent, and we take those resources and clean up that and then have them future paced. So now imagine going out into the future, maybe a couple of weeks or a month from now, and imagine yourself in a situation where if you were in the past, you would have responded in that old way. And really try hard in vain to blush. Go on, really try. You used to be good at this. Come on, try. The harder you try, the more calm and relaxed you become. The more funny it seems. Really play with it. It's really easy to do. Test your work. Make sure you're done. Not so much that you know it's done, but the client knows it's done as well. So that when they leave the office, they know beyond a shadow of a doubt that they've changed. So have some fun with this, and I'll see you soon.